This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. K-State's Mike Brouk and Midwest Dairy's Maureen Windisch start today's show as they take a look into the dairy industry and what dairy products are preferred by consumers. They also discuss how the perception of dairy has changed and if it has impacted dairy producers. The show and conversation continue with Mike and Maureen as they chat about dairy and customer preferences. Matt McKernan, K-State Extension horticulture expert, in today's show, explaining fire blight, a highly destructive bacterial disease that can damage apple, pear, and other trees in the rose family. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Thursday show discussing dairy as we do round out Dairy Month, which is the month of June, with K-State Dairy Specialist Mike Brouk and Midwest Dairy's Senior Manager of Insights and Business Analytics, Maureen Windisch. Mike, Maureen, I appreciate you both taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much as well.
When we're thinking about dairy and dairy products, what qualifies a dairy product as a dairy product?
From my lens, from the checkoff lens, we are talking about all products that are derived from cow's milk.
And you mentioned dairy checkoff. Can you explain to us a little bit about what is dairy checkoff?
Dairy checkoff is a network of different checkoffs throughout the United States. There's a national checkoff that's in Chicago. I'm part of the Midwest checkoff, and we support really dairy farmers on messaging and promotions for dairy across different verticals and channels within our region, specifically retail, as well as restaurants. We also work with healthcare professionals and teach them about nutrition.
Mike, for this dairy checkoff, what impact have you seen it have for K-State, Kansas, and overall dairy producers that you interact with?
You know, it's a very, very exciting time for our dairy industry, and a lot has really happened in the last 20 years. You know, if you go back about 20 years ago, dairy products were probably not viewed as very healthful. And people were trying to reduce fat intakes and those sorts of things. And while obviously, you know, overindulgence can be an issue, we've come to realize over the last 20 years that dairy products, both milk fat as well as protein, are a very important part of the human diet. And a lot of the reason we've realized that is because we've invested heavily from the checkoff dollars into specific research that identifies its benefits in the human health world. And we've taken those results to various conferences and to professionals, as Maureen had mentioned, so that we have educated the human health side, and that has resulted in some very significant changes in how dairy products, I think, are viewed by consumers.
And with that tie-in of human health and dairy being a part of it, have you seen trends because of that?
Yes, definitely. So in our region, we do custom research with consumers, and we go out to about 1,000 consumers annually, and we ask them their perceptions of dairy's nutrition and healthfulness. And in our region, I'm very happy to report that 86% of consumers do believe that dairy is healthy and nutritious. Those numbers are extremely high. And since we've been tracking that specific attribute, that's been pretty stable over like the last 5 years. So I think in the past, some of the trends you're speaking to, Mike, are, you know, trends that maybe stretch back in the fat-free craze. And now we know that consumers' perceptions of fat probably have improved since then.
Have you seen changes then for what type of milk they're buying, whether 2% or whole milk? Have those seen any changes?
Yes, actually, we are noting that whole milk is having a moment with consumers. That wasn't the case when I first came on board 4 years ago. This is a very new and recent trend where consumers are finding, that they want the whole product. They don't just want parts of the product. They want to see it, in its entirety with all the components already that are already there for them to enjoy and to get all the benefits from.
What is 2% milk or the different types of milk? How do they get distinguished? Mike, I'm going to send it to you.
So it's based on the fat level in that milk. So typically what we do when raw milk comes into the processing plant, either right before or right after pasteurization, depending on how the plant is set up, they will separate the cream or the fat from the skim, and then they will blend back into the skim milk, the percentage of fat that they want in the jug. So if they want whole milk, minimum of 3.25, and then 2% would be 2%, 1% would be 1% fat. And we usually don't see it in our markets, but in some markets you see 0.5%, which is a 0.5% fat in that milk.
Do you see these trends of people liking whole milk more right now impacting producers?
So from the producer standpoint, most of our producers across the United States are actually paid on the basis of components. So their milk, rather than total pounds of milk, were paid for the pounds of fat, pounds of protein, pounds of other solids that are contained in that milk. And that's been the case for most of our producers for probably much of the last 20 years or so. And there's some areas of the United States that are still paid based on total pounds and not so much emphasis on components. But for most of us, components are important. So what we've seen happen is for years, the average butter fat percentage in milk was 3.3, 3.4, maybe 3.5. That was kind of the flow into the plant. However, when we started putting extra value on fat, we started to see that change. And really in the last 10 years, there's been dramatic changes to the supply of milk coming into the creameries. So, today it's not unusual for a Holstein farm to be shipping milk that's 4.5% butterfat or higher. And as a result of that, our total butterfat production in the United States has drastically increased. And that's a combination of genetics and feeding. It takes both to move that forward. And so now we're actually in a situation where currently we're producing probably more butterfat across the United States than what we actually need to meet the demand. And we're able to export that excess. So it market-wise, it's still working out. We do see a few areas in the United States where they have stopped paying premiums for butterfat content above 4.5%. So there are some areas in the United States where that is occurring, not here in Kansas, but some other places. So yeah, it does. It impacts the producer's paycheck as well as decisions that we're making on genetics as well as feeding practices.
For trends in dairy products, do you see it having a big influence on the market, Maureen?
The protein that Mike had just mentioned is really in high demand right now, really across all kinds of products, not just dairy. But when you look at what's growing the dairy industry, it is definitely pointing to people's desire for more protein in their diets. One of the most compelling stats that we have about the way people are eating today is 70% of consumers are looking to increase their protein intake. The RDA allowances have changed and nearly doubled for protein since they were last assessed. So that's a significant change. So that's part of it. Also, we know there's an obesity epidemic. A lot of folks are on GLP-1s. Not to overemphasize the importance, or the influence of this group, but they do consume protein at a higher rate than other consumers. So that consumer group is definitely increasing their protein intake at a higher rate. And so we do expect with more people being on those drugs that that demand for protein will continue. And in fact, maybe you have heard already, but there is a whey shortage coming.
What is a whey shortage, and how is that something that we're going to have to deal with?
Well, there's just not enough whey for the number of producers that are looking to add whey to products. So, for example, you may have walked down the snack aisle recently and noticed that there are some chips. Not going to name brands specifically, but they are adding whey to their product line. And that's partly to make those products more desirable to those that are on GLP-1s or those that are really just looking to control their weight.
And Mike, can you inform us, what is whey?
So whey is actually a byproduct of or I should say maybe more correctly, it's a co-product of the cheese industry. So when we make cheese, we lower the moisture content of that cheese in the process as the curd is formed. The liquid portion, moisture portion, part of that leaves the curd, and along with that are soluble proteins associated with the whey. So those are very healthy proteins. They contain all of the essential amino acids that we need in a human diet. They also digest a little bit different in the human diet in that they generally digest quicker than what the casein, which is the protein retained in the cheese, would digest.
We're cutting to a short break now, but when we come back, we'll once again be joined by Mike and Maureen. We continue our show of Agriculture Today with K-State's Mike Brouk and Midwest Dairy's Maureen Windisch. Mike, as we continue our conversation, what are some interesting ways whey has continued to be used in different products?
We're seeing some interesting things happen. There's a cottage cheese product out there that would contain protein from the cheese curd, so the casein, and then they're adding whey protein back to it. So you have both the quickly digestible protein as well as the slower digested protein all in the same product. And it's obviously a high protein foodstuff. So really seeing some interesting things along that line as well.
When we think about the dairy market, dairy products, is there anything that has surprised you?
From my lens, I would definitely say whey. The way that whey is being used in products today, I don't think any of us really could have predicted that this particular protein would be added to the snacking market like it is today.
I would point out one thing from a human standpoint. There are some people out there that do have milk allergies. And I just want to encourage consumers, make sure that you read labels carefully, because whey may be showing up in places where you didn't expect it. So just an FYI, it does impact some people potentially in a negative way as well.
What can dairy producers, be doing to maybe help encourage people to have dairy in their lives?
As we look at who consumers trust farmers. And Maureen could probably give you some statistics on that. I don't have those in front of me, but people really do trust farmers. So anytime you get an opportunity to share your dairy or go to the grocery store and maybe help Midwest Dairy in some sort of promotion opportunity where you actually speak to consumers, they do trust you and they're interested in what you do. And what a lot of people don't realize is that, the dairy industry it's 24/7. We milk cows every day of the year. Holidays don't make a difference. We still have to milk cows, feed cows, and care for cows. Our folks put in a lot of hours to make sure that we have the raw milk that we need to produce the dairy products that are on the shelves. So just communication, however you do that directly with consumers is really, really important, I think, and letting people know what the dairy industry is all about.
Mike, you took the words right out of my mouth, and I do have some statistics. Among trusted sources about dairy products, so where are consumers going for information about their dairy products, they really do trust their doctor. So that's why we communicate with health professionals, also dietitians. Of course, not everybody has a dietitian, but it's great to hear from the dietitians, and they believe the dietitians as well. And then right below dietitians are farmers. So they really do trust farmers, and they love hearing the stories about how they're caring for their cows and the land. I would say those two things are the things that consumers are most interested in learning about. And it definitely resonates with what Mike just said, that farmers being a part of this conversation is vitally important. Direct to consumer is, they love to hear from farmers.
And I guess I might add real quick too, amongst the younger generation, information that dairy farmers post on Facebook or other social media is hugely important. And we've got dairy farmers out there that they report something every day. So they have huge followings of people that are interested in what's going on the farm today and how things are going. So great way to connect with people, and you don't even have to leave your farm to do that. So
social media has really given the farmer the chance to speak for themselves, and we highly encourage that. As an association, we can help farmers with that. We can help with messaging and how to go about that effectively with consumers. So definitely reach out to us for that kind of guidance.
Maureen, you mentioned farmers being a part of the conversation, and if social media is not their thing or that's not an avenue they're willing to pursue, how else can they become a part of the conversation?
Farm tours, for sure. I would suggest, reaching out to Midwest Dairy to help you with farm tours. We can also provide you with giveaways, that would be desirable to consumers, and how to connect, with consumers on those farm tours in, the best way possible to engage with them.
When we're thinking about dairy from each of your perspectives, what's next, or what are you excited about?
Well, I'll give a little bit of a Kansas perspective here. We have a rapidly growing dairy industry here in Kansas, both on the production side as well as on the processing side. And that has been the result of a lot of work by a lot of people over the last roughly 30 years. So 30 years ago, if you looked at what we had here in Kansas, we actually had a dying dairy industry. And we dropped to a low point of about 77,000 dairy cows in the state. And over the last 30 years, again, with a lot of help from a lot of people, that industry is growing year over year. Right now, we're the fastest growing dairy state in the nation. So in the last year, we've added about 44,000 head of lactating dairy cows in the state, which represents about a 25% increase in dairy cow numbers. And we look to probably in the next year or so to add another 40, maybe 50,000. So today, we rank number 12th in the number of dairy cows in the nation. 30 years ago, we were about 27 or so. So it's just been a huge wave that is finally coming to some sort of maturity, I think. And we're excited about that. And on the processing side, last year with the new Hillmar plant, we doubled our more than doubled our processing capacity here in the state. So really, really exciting times for the industry. And, as we grow forward, we see the next generation coming back to many of those farms. We have far fewer farms than we did 30 years ago, but we do have on many of those farms, we've got the next generation coming back. So that's really excited. I mean, I work with our Kansas Dairy Association and Kansas Dairy Commission. And, when I sit in board meetings today, I have the sons and daughters of dairymen that I sat in the board meetings when I first started. So it's really neat to see that.
Maureen, from your perspective, what are you excited about for the future?
I really am excited that there is such high love of dairy by consumers. in our region, we have an 88% agreement with the statement, I love dairy. And that really is why people eat, because they enjoy the food. We cannot forget how important enjoyment is. And we know that people just love dairy, and it's nutritious, and it's affordable, and it has that protein content that they're looking for these days. We have recipes coming out all the time that are unique, products that are coming out all the time that are very unique, working very hard on behalf of consumers to make it the very best dairy experience that they can have. And there's so much we can deliver. I'm just so excited about that.
If people are wanting to find out more information about dairy, what resources do you recommend for them?
Well, I would say any of the associations, of course, whether it's very local, at the state level or regional or national. I think our processors are always, willing, have, boatloads of information, recipes, lots of ways to work with dairy in their homes. And then the farmer, of course. We have so many farmers that want to share their stories and so much knowledge that we can tap into as an association, but you can also directly contact farmers in your maybe right down the street from you.
Yeah, from the production standpoint, if you need some assistance there, our K-State Research and Extension is a good place to go for information. We've got specialists that work in different areas, and we've got good support when it comes to things like waste management through the Department of Ag here in Kansas, as well as animal health as well through the dairy inspection program. So we've got some, one of the things I hear from producers that have moved here from other places is they're really grateful for the support that Kansas provides over a great deal of issues and areas. So,
Mike, Maureen, I appreciate both taking the time to join us today.
Oh my gosh, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity to participate as well. And just want to remind everybody, if you missed celebrating, June is Dairy Month. You have another opportunity in July. The third Sunday of July is our National Ice Cream Day. So get out and enjoy that on that day.
That was K-State Dairy Specialist Mike Brouk and Midwest Dairy's Senior Manager of Insights and Business Analytics, Maureen Windisch. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. If you're noticing blossoms, shoots, and branches wilting and turning black on apple, pear, and other trees in the rose family, it's most likely being caused by a highly destructive bacterial disease called fire blight. K-State Extension horticulture expert Matt McKernan discusses the damage that fire blight can cause and how it can be treated. He also covers herbicide injury in gardens and a couple of insect pests, spider mites, and squash bugs. Matt, we've kind of reached that point where we're starting to see some potential disease concerns, and one of those that you've been noticing is fire blight in trees.
Yes, fire blight is a bacterium disease that really can affect over 130 species of plants, primarily in the rose family. So here in Kansas, some of our trees like apples, crab apples, pears, and even some of our shrubs like blackberries, raspberries, pyracantha, hawthorn, cotoneaster, and quince. These are all plants that are commonly affected by this disease. So this time of year, we want to be looking for fire blight disease and trying to remove infected portions of the plant so that the bacterium isn't able to overwinter and continue this infection year after year. Fire blight damage can really vary from killing flower blossoms in the spring when they bloom to killing new growth in the ends of the branches, all the way to killing the entire tree or shrub if the infection is severe enough. So right now, we really want to be looking at the new growth of our trees and shrubs, and we want to be looking for what's called a characteristic shepherd's crook at the end. Basically, the terminal growth on the end of the branch starts to turn brown and die, and as that branch dies, it actually peels back or turns back and kind of turns into a hook shape. maybe like the top of a shepherd's crook would be.
In terms of controlling fire blight, is there something that we can do?
There are lots of management strategies for us to be able to kind of minimize fire blight's impact in the landscape. When choosing new trees and shrubs, we want to look for varieties that are resistant to fire blight to help reduce the likelihood of disease. We also want to make sure that during the late summer and winter months, we are cutting out and removing any infected cankers or portions of the tree that might harbor the disease of the fire blight bacterium. When we make our pruning cuts, they should be typically done at least 6 to 10 inches below where the disease symptoms occur on the branches of our trees and shrubs. And we want to make sure that we're doing a regular job of disinfecting our pruning tools with either like a 10% bleach or an alcohol solution so that we're not continuing to spread that fire blight disease as we manage it in our trees and shrubs. We just want to make sure we never prune in wet weather. And typically in the late summer and fall months, that's going to be an ideal time to prune out that infected tissue so that we're not having that plant reinfected again the following season. And try to remove it from our trees and shrubs so that we don't continue that infestation.
Is there anything that we're seeing in the garden right now or that maybe we should be on the lookout for in the coming weeks?
A lot of gardens around the state are dealing with herbicide injury. Plants that have been affected by herbicides that have volatilized and are kind of wind-borne. Often with that, we see cupping and curling of the leaves and a little bit of distortion in the growth. And oftentimes with herbicide injury, it's a wait-and-see type problem where we have to see how the plant's going to respond, but some supplemental water is always helpful when we are trying to help our plants recover from herbicide injury. On the insect side of things, we're really getting to that season where spider mite populations start to explode. Spider mites typically feed on a wide variety of plants and are found on the underside of the leaf. They essentially suck the juices out of the leaf, causing kind of these yellowing spots or stippling in the leaf. And usually a strong stream of water to the undersides of the leaves once to twice a week can really help us manage spider mite populations in our vegetable and flower bed plants.
And squash bugs, that's something else we tend to see this time of year?
Yes, squash bugs are also active this time of year, so we want to be looking for the adult beetles on our squash plants. We also really want to be looking for the eggs on the undersides of the leaves as well. They have a coppery brown egg, usually laid in large clusters, and by squishing or removing those eggs, we can really help protect our squash plants and pumpkin plants from squash bug damage for the next few months.
That's K-State Extension horticulture expert Matt McKernan with information on fire blight, herbicide injury in gardens, spider mites, and squash bugs. To learn more, contact the nearest K-State Extension office. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.